Have you ever wondered if the story of Lucifer's dramatic fall from heaven, the proud angel cast down for rebellion, is actually rooted in the Bible, or if it's something that grew out of misunderstandings, translations gone awry, and centuries of storytelling? Picture this: a gleaming morning star plummeting from the skies, symbolizing ultimate pride and defiance against God. It's an image that's captivated artists, writers, and theologians for ages, from John Milton's Paradise Lost to modern movies and music. But what if I told you that this tale might not be exactly what the ancient scriptures intended? Today, we're diving deep into this mystery, peeling back layers of history, language, and tradition to see what's really there. We'll compare the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Canon, ancient Gehazi homilies, and the Book of 1 Enoch with the core biblical texts. We'll trace how passages like Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, often cited as proof of Lucifer's downfall, were actually royal taunt songs and temple imagery, not direct devil origin stories. And we'll explore how Ethiopian manuscripts preserve contexts that the Western world might have overlooked, helping us read the Bible more carefully. No hype, no sensational claims, just sourced clarity from the texts themselves. Let's embark on this journey together, step by step, and let the scriptures speak for themselves. To start, we need to set the stage by understanding where this Lucifer legend comes from. The name Lucifer itself isn't some ancient demonic title. It's Latin for light-bearer or morning star, derived from the planet Venus, which shines brightly just before dawn. In the Bible, it appears only once in the King James Version, in Isaiah 14:12. "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning?" But here's the twist: that's a translation choice from the Latin Vulgate, compiled by Jerome in the late 4th century AD. The original Hebrew text uses Helel ben Shahar, meaning shining one, son of the dawn. No devil mentioned there at all. So why did it become synonymous with Satan? It snowballed over centuries through interpretive leaps, church fathers' writings, and cultural myths. Early Jewish interpreters saw it as a metaphor for the Babylonian king, not a fallen angel. But by the time Christianity spread, figures like Origen in the 3rd century started linking it to angelic rebellion, drawing from other traditions. And in Ethiopia, with its ancient Christian roots dating back to the 4th century, when King Ezana converted, the story evolved differently. Preserved in Ge'ez, the liturgical language that's like a time capsule of early biblical thought. Let's talk about Ethiopia's unique role here. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church has one of the oldest continuous Christian traditions, claiming descent from the Queen of Sheba's visit to Solomon around 950 BC, though that's more legend than fact. What is historical is that Christianity arrived via Frumentius, a Syrian missionary ordained by Athanasius of Alexandria in 328 AD. This led to the translation of the Bible into Ge'ez by the 5th century, creating a canon that's broader than the Protestant or Catholic ones. It includes books like 1 Enoch, Jubilees, and the Ascension of Isaiah, which were influential in early Judaism and Christianity, but later deemed apocryphal in the West. These texts provide extra layers to the fallen angel narrative. For instance, 1 Enoch, written between the 3rd century BC and 1st century AD, describes the Watchers, angels who descended to earth, taught forbidden knowledge, and fathered giants, leading to their judgment. This isn't exactly Lucifer's prideful fall, but it's a story of rebellion that got blended in. In Ethiopian homilies, like those from the 14th century Gadla Adam or sermons by Abba Salama, these elements are woven with Isaiah and Ezekiel, but with a focus on cosmic order, rather than a single devil's biography. Now imagine you're holding an ancient manuscript, its pages yellowed and inscribed in Ge'ez script. These aren't just relics, they're witnesses to how early Christians understood Scripture. The Tewahedo Canon, formalized around the 15th century but drawing from much older sources, includes 81 books compared to the Protestant 66. Why does this matter? Because it preserves contexts that clarify metaphors in the Hebrew Bible. Take Isaiah 14. It's part of a series of oracles against nations, specifically a taunt against the king of Babylon, likely Nebuchadnezzar II, who ruled from 605 to 562 BC and sacked Jerusalem in 586 BC. The chapter mocks his downfall. How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn! You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. This is poetic hyperbole, comparing the king's hubris to the Canaanite myth of Athtar, a god who tried to usurp the throne of Baal and failed. Ugaritic texts from the 14th century BC, discovered in Ras Shamra, show similar falling star imagery for divine pretenders. So, Isaiah's using familiar Near Eastern motifs to taunt a human tyrant, not describing a literal angelic expulsion. But how did this become Lucifer's story? Blame it on a chain of interpretations. In the 2nd century AD, Jewish apocalyptic literature like 2 Enoch started personifying evil forces. Then, early church fathers like Tertullian, around 200 AD, and Origen linked Isaiah 14 to Jesus' words in Luke 10:18. I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Origen, in his De Principiis, speculated that Satan was once a high angel who fell due to pride, drawing from Ezekiel 28 as well. Ezekiel 28 is another key passage, a lament over the king of Tyre, describing him as a guardian cherub anointed in Eden, perfect until iniquity was found. Tyre's king, Ethiopian III, 591-573 BC, was allied with Egypt against Babylon, and the prophecy uses temple imagery, Eden as a sanctuary, precious stones like those in the high priest's breastplate, Exodus 28. It's satirical, portraying the king as a divine figure who overreached, much like the Babylonian king. No direct Satan reference, but again, later interpreters saw parallels. In Ethiopia, these passages are read through the lens of verse Enoch, which expands on Genesis 6's sons of God as fallen angels. First Enoch's Book of Watchers, chapters 1 to 36, details how 200 angels, led by Shemihazah and Azazel, lusted after human women, descended to Mount Hermon, around 1,300 meters high in modern Lebanon-Syria border, and taught arts like metallurgy and cosmetics, seen as corrupting influences. This led to the birth of Nephilim giants, whose violence prompted the flood. God binds the watchers in the abyss until judgment. Ethiopian manuscripts, like those in the Abba Garima monastery dating to the 6th century, include illustrations of these scenes. Angels with wings chained in darkness, giants devouring humans. This isn't pride as the sin, but envy and disobedience. Gay's homilies, such as the Mystery of Heaven and Earth from the 15th century, connect this to Satan's fall, but emphasize a pre-creation rebellion, differing from Western timelines. Let's pause and think about the cultural impact. In medieval Europe, as the Vulgate spread after 405 AD, Lucifer became a proper name. By the 12th century, in works like the Golden Legend by Jacobus de Origen, it was full-blown mythology. Lucifer as the brightest angel, leading a third of heaven in revolt. From Revelation 12:4's tail swept a third of the stars. But in Ethiopia, isolated by Islamic expansions after the 7th century, the tradition stayed closer to Enochic roots. The Aksumite Empire, 100-940 AD, with its obelisks and coinage showing Christian symbols from the 4th century, fostered a theology where angels' falls warn against human hubris, not just demonic origins. Politically, this shaped rulers like Zara Yacob, 1434-1468, who used Enoch to justify purges against heretics, seeing himself as a defender of cosmic order. Economically, manuscript production in Ethiopia was tied to monasteries, using goat skins and inks from local plants, preserving texts during times of famine or invasion. Technologically, Ge'ez script evolved from South Arabian influences around 500 BC, allowing complex theological expressions. Compare this to the Dead Sea Scrolls, 3rd century BC to 1st century AD, which include fragments of 1 Enoch, showing its wide Jewish acceptance before the rabbinic canon excluded it post-70 AD destruction of the temple. Now diving deeper into Isaiah 14. The chapter is embedded in Isaiah's oracles, chapters 13-23, written during the Assyrian crisis, 8th century BC, but edited later. Isaiah, son of Amoz, prophesied from 740-701 BC under kings like Hezekiah. The Taunts song, 14:421, uses mythological echoes, the king descending to Sheol, greeted by dead rulers as a fallen tree. This parallels Babylonian laments for kings like Nabonidus, 556-539 BC, who claimed divine status. In Jewish exegesis like the Targum Jonathan, 2nd century AD, it's clearly about Nebuchadnezzar, not angels. But Christian allegorists, influenced by Philo of Alexandria's 20 BC 50 AD, symbolic methods layered spiritual meanings. Similarly, Ezekiel 28:11-19 describes the Tyre king's expulsion from Eden, the garden of God, covered in gems, walking among fiery stones, echoing the tabernacle. Exodus 25. Ezekiel, exiled to Babylon in 597 BC, uses this to critique Phoenician trade empires, which controlled cedar from Lebanon and spices from Arabia, fueling pride. The cherub might reference winged guardians in Assyrian art, like those at Nineveh's gates, now in the British Museum. In versed Enoch, composed in Aramaic and Hebrew, found complete only in Ge'ez's translations, the fall is collective. Shemahaz's oath on Mount Hermon symbolizes covenant breaking, contrasting God's covenants. Ethiopian fathers like George of Sagla, 14th century, in his Book of Mystery link this to Lucifer, but as a title for the chief rebel, not the biblical morning star. Let's explore controversies. Some scholars like Elaine Pagels in The Origin of Satan, 1995, argue the fallen angel myth demonized political enemies, Babylon as Satan. Others, like Geoffrey Burton Russell in The Devil, 1977, trace how Zoroastrian dualism, 6th century BC Persia, influenced Jewish ideas of Ahriman versus Ahura Mazda, seeping into post-exilic texts. Modern interpretations vary. In Pentecostal traditions, Lucifer's fall explains demonic possession. In liberal theology, it's psychological metaphor for ego. Ethiopian Pentecostals today blend Tewahedo with global views, but manuscripts like the 18th century Andemta commentaries stress literal readings tempered by tradition. Think about the global legacy. The Lucifer myth inspired Dante's Inferno, 1320, where he's frozen in hell's center, Milton's Epic, 1667, portraying him as tragic hero, even Goethe's Faust, 1808. In art, Gustave Doré's illustrations, 1866, show the fall dramatically. In music, from Handel's oratorios to heavy metal bands like Black Sabbath's The Fallen Angel. But back to sources. The Septuagint, 3rd-2nd century BC Greek translation, renders Helel as Eosphoros, morning star, without demonic connotation. Jerome's Vulgate changed that. In Ethiopian context, during the Zagwe dynasty, 912-70 AD, rock-hewn churches in Lalibela incorporated Enochic motifs in frescoes, showing angels' judgment. We've covered the basics, but there's so much more. The cosmic courtroom scenes in Job 1:2, where Satan is an accuser, not fallen yet, contrast with later myths. Daniel 10's Prince of Persia as angelic being shows heavenly battles, influencing Revelation 12's war in heaven. Revelation 12:7-9 describes Michael casting out the dragon, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan. Written around 95 AD by John on Patmos, it's apocalyptic symbolism for Rome's persecution, not prehistory. Ethiopian apocalypses like the Apocalypse of Peter, included in some canons, expand this, but Tewahedo sticks close to one Enoch. Let's consider historiography. Adolf von Harnack, 1851-1930, argued early Christianity mythologized Satan from Jewish roots. Modern Ethiopists like Sergiu Haile Selassie highlight how Aksum's trade with Rome and India preserved diverse texts. Lesser-known fact: the Kebra Nagast, 14th century, Ethiopia's national epic, mentions angelic falls, but focuses on Solomon's wisdom over demonic origins. Biographies: Enoch, traditionally the author, is the seventh from Adam, Genesis 5, walked with God and ascended. In Brunda Enoch, he's a scribe witnessing heavenly secrets. Azazel, from Leviticus 16's scapegoat, becomes a fallen angel in Enoch, teaching warfare, sub-stories, the flood as angelic sin's consequence, giant spirits become demons, found Enoch 15. Comparisons: Greek myths like Prometheus, bound for giving fire parallel Azazel's teachings. Causes: post-exilic Judaism, after 539 BC, absorbed Persian angelology, evolving Satan from court prosecutor to rebel. Effects: unified Christian demonology by the Council of Nicaea, 325 AD, but Ethiopia's non-Chalcedonian stance, post-451, kept Miaphysite views, influencing angel lore. Tangent: the Nag Hammadi Library, 1945 discovery. Gnostic texts like the hypostasis of the archons portray the demiurge as fallen, echoing Enoch, but with Platonic twists. Another, Islamic parallels in the Quran, 7th century. Iblis refusing to bow to Adam, cast out for pride, similar but distinct. In depth, Gay's literature's homilies, like those of Michael of Atre, 15th century, use Isaiah for Christological taunts against death, not Satan. We've built a foundation, but let's trace the snowball effect chronologically. Pre-300 BC, Hebrew Bible compositions. Isaiah. Ezekiel used taunts without angelic falls. 300-100 BC. Enochic literature develops Watcher myth. 1st century AD. Jesus references Satan falling, but contextually as exorcism, victory. 2nd, 3rd centuries. Church fathers allegorize. 4th century Vulgate introduces Lucifer. 5th, 7th centuries. Gay's translations preserve Enoch. Medieval. Myth solidifies in West, nuanced in Ethiopia. Reformation, 16th century. Protestants strip Apocrypha, but myth persists. Enlightenment. Rationalists like Voltaire mock it as superstition. Today, pop culture versus scholarly deconstruction. This is just the start. There's more to unpack. As we continue our exploration, let's zoom in on the chronological development of this myth, because understanding the timeline reveals how a simple poetic taunt could morph into a full-fledged angelic tragedy. Imagine yourself back in the 8th century BC, in the kingdom of Judah, where the prophet Isaiah is delivering his messages amid political turmoil. The Assyrian Empire is on the rise, threatening smaller nations like Israel and Judah. Isaiah, living through the reigns of kings Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, uses vivid imagery to warn of God's judgment. In chapter 14, he's not talking about some celestial drama. He's gloating over the future fall of Babylon, which at that time was under Assyrian control, but would later become a superpower under Nabopolassar in 626 BC. The morning star reference draws from ancient astronomy, Venus visible at dawn, symbolizing fleeting glory. In Canaanite lore, which the Israelites knew well from their neighbors, Gods like Shahar and Shalim represented dawn and dusk, and stories of ambitious deities falling from mountaintops mirrored human kings' downfalls. Isaiah cleverly adapts this to say, look, even the mightiest tyrant will crash like that star vanishing at sunrise. No angels involved, just sharp political satire. Fast forward a couple of centuries to the Babylonian exile in 586 BC, when Jews like Ezekiel are carted off to Mesopotamia. Ezekiel, a priest by training, prophesies from the banks of the Kebar River, using even more elaborate symbols. Chapter 28 targets Tyre, a wealthy Phoenician city-state that profited from Judah's misfortune by siding with Babylon. Tyre was an economic powerhouse, controlling Mediterranean trade routes, with ships carrying ivory from Africa, purple dye from murex snails, and metals from Spain. Its king, puffed up with wealth, is likened to a cherub in Eden, a nod to the garden story in Genesis, but also to temple guardians. Cherubim weren't cute baby angels. They were fierce, sphinx-like creatures in Mesopotamian art, protecting sacred spaces. Ezekiel says this king walked on God's holy mountain amid blazing stones, evoking the volcanic imagery of Sinai or the gem-studded altar in the temple. But pride leads to expulsion, just as Adam and Eve were driven out. Again, it's about human hubris, not a demonic backstory. The economic angle is key. Tyre's fall in 332 BC to Alexander the Great, who built a causeway to conquer the island city, fulfilled the prophecy in spectacular fashion, underscoring how wealth without wisdom invites ruin. Now enter the intertestamental period, roughly 400 BC to the time of Jesus, when Jewish literature explodes with apocalyptic visions. This is where first Enoch comes in, a collection of writings attributed to Enoch, the biblical figure who walked with God and was no more, in Genesis 5:24. Composed in stages, the earliest parts, like the Book of Watchers, date to the 3rd century BC, during the Hellenistic era, after Alexander's conquests. Judea is under Ptolemaic, then Seleucid rule, with cultural clashes sparking works that explain evil's origins. In 1 Enoch 6:11, the angels see beautiful human daughters, echoing Genesis 6:1-4's sons of God, and descend. Led by Shemi-Hazza, they swear an oath on Mount Hermon, a real peak sacred in ancient times associated with Baal worship. They teach forbidden secrets. Azazel instructs on weapons and jewelry, making humans warlike and vain. Others reveal astrology and herbs, blurring divine and human realms. The result? Giant offspring, the Nephilim, who ravage the earth, eating everything in sight, even people. This chaos prompts cries to heaven, and archangels like Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel intervene. God commands the binding of the watchers in the valleys of the earth, a precursor to the abyss in Revelation. This story isn't about one proud Lucifer. It's a group rebellion driven by lust and overreach, but it provides raw material for later myths. In Ethiopian tradition, Fur Enoch is canonical, translated early into Ge'ez. Manuscripts from Lake Tana monasteries, like those carbon-dated to the 9th century, show how it was copied with illuminations. Angels with multiple eyes and wings, giants as towering monsters. Ge'ez homilies expand this. For example, the Homily on the Angels by an anonymous 13th century writer describes the Watcher's envy of humanity's creation, tying it to a pre-fall jealousy. This differs from Western views, where pride is central. Culturally, in Ethiopia, this reinforced community values during times of invasion, like the 16th century wars with the Adal Sultanate, where angels were invoked as protectors. Let's bring in key figures. Enoch himself is fascinating, a minor biblical character elevated to mystic hero. In Jewish pseudepigrapha, he's taken on heavenly tours, seeing the universe's secrets, storehouses of wind, stars chained for disobedience. Enoch 18. This influenced later Kabbalah and even Christian mystics like Hildegard of Bingen in the 12th century, who saw visions of falling stars as sinful souls. Another figure, Azazel, whose name means strong against God, appears in Leviticus 16 as the scapegoat bearing Israel's sins into the wilderness. In Enoch, he's the chief teacher of evil arts, bound hand and foot, cast into darkness. This scapegoat ritual, performed on Yom Kippur, symbolizes atonement, but Enoch personifies it as a fallen being. Comparisons to other myths: Prometheus in Greek lore, bound for giving fire knowledge to humans, or Loki in Norse tales, chained for mischief leading to Ragnarok. Politically, these texts had impact. During the Maccabean Revolt, 167–160 BC, against Antiochus IV, who desecrated the temple, Enochic writings fueled resistance, portraying oppressors as giant-like tyrants doomed by heavenly justice. The Dead Sea Scrolls community at Qumran hoarded multiple copies of Wun Enoch, seeing themselves as sons of light against sons of darkness in the War Scroll. This dualism, possibly influenced by Zoroastrianism from Persian rule, 539–332 BC, where Angra Mainyu opposes Ahura Mazda, shaped how evil was seen as organized opposition. Economically, the spread of these ideas tied to trade. The Silk Road and Red Sea routes connected Ethiopia, Aksum, to Judea, India, and Rome. Aksumite coins from the 3rd century AD show crosses after conversion, but earlier pagan symbols like crescents hint at star myths. Technologically, parchment production in Ethiopia used acacia gum inks, preserving texts in dry highland climates. Now into the New Testament era. Jesus in Luke 10:18 says, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven," but contextually, it's after disciples report demons submitting. Not a historical fall, but a visionary defeat. Paul in 2 Corinthians 11:14 calls Satan an angel of light, perhaps nodding to the morning star. Revelation, written amid Domitian's persecutions, 81–96 AD, has Michael warring against the dragon, casting him to earth. The dragon's tail sweeps a third of the stars, interpreted as fallen angels, but symbolically Rome, 7 heads like 7 hills. Early church fathers build on this. Justin Martyr, 100–165 AD, in his dialogue with Trypho, equates the Watchers with demons. Irenaeus, 130–202 AD, in Against Heresies, sees Satan as the serpent, fallen before creation. Origen, 184–253 AD, the Alexandrian thinker, systematizes it. In On First Principles, Satan was a perfect being who fell through free will, becoming the devil. He links Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Enoch, despite Enoch's non-canonical status in the West. Origen's ideas spread, but his allegorical method drew criticism, later condemned at the Council of Constantinople in 553 AD for suggesting universal salvation, even for the devil. In Ethiopia, Frumentius, 300–380 AD, enslaved then freed, becomes bishop translating scriptures. The Gaia's Bible includes Enoch, influencing homilies like those of Yared, 505–571 AD, the saint who composed hymns still sung today, with lyrics about angelic harmony disrupted by rebellion. Controversies abound. Gnostics like the Scythians in the 2nd century saw the fall as the creator gods, Yaldabaoth, arrogance, inverting orthodox views, found in Nag Hammadi texts like the Apocryphal of John. Marcion, 85–160 AD, rejected the Old Testament God as evil, seeing Satan as his agent. Modern takes, psychologists like Carl Jung, view Lucifer as the shadow archetype, necessary for wholeness. Feminists critique the lust-driven fall as patriarchal blame on women. In pop culture, shows like Lucifer, 2016–2021, humanize him as a charming rebel. Tangent, related falls in other religions. Hinduism's Asuras, demons cast from heaven, Buddhism's Mara, tempter defeated under the Bodhi tree. African myths, like Yoruba's Eshu, trickster not fully evil. Biographies of secondary figures, Shemihaza, whose name means "my name has seen," leads the oath. A sub-story of binding vows gone wrong, like biblical rash oaths, Jephthah's daughter. Analyses. Causes of the myth's growth. Need to explain evil without blaming God, using theodicy. Effects. Justified witch hunts in the Middle Ages, like the Malleus Maleficarum, 1486, linking demons to pacts. Another tangent, the Vulgate's role. Jerome, 347–420 AD, translating in Bethlehem, chooses Lucifer for poetic flair, influenced by Roman astronomy. This Latin Bible dominates Europe until the Reformation. In the Middle Ages, Ethiopian kings like Amda-Seyon, 1314–1344, use Enoch in campaigns against Muslims and pagans, seeing battles as cosmic extensions. We've traced from ancient prophets to early Christianity, but the snowball rolls on. As we pick up the thread in our journey through this intricate tapestry of myth, scripture, and tradition, let's venture into the medieval period, where the Lucifer story really starts to crystallize into the form we recognize today. Picture Europe in the 5th century AD, just after the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD, with barbarian invasions reshaping the continent. Christianity is spreading, but it's fragmented. Monasteries become beacons of learning, copying manuscripts by candlelight. In the West, Augustine of Hippo, 354–430 AD, the influential theologian from North Africa, writes in his City of God about the devil as a fallen angel, drawing from Isaiah and Ezekiel but emphasizing original sin more than a detailed backstory. He sees Satan as envious of humanity, not primarily proud, which aligns somewhat with Enochic traditions. But as Latin becomes the lingua franca of the Church, Jerome's Vulgate solidifies Lucifer as a name. And by the 6th century, in Gregory the Great's Moralia in Job, Satan is portrayed as the morning star fallen through superbia, pride, the deadly sin that heads the list. Meanwhile, in Ethiopia, isolated by geography and the rise of Islam after Muhammad's Hijrah in 622 AD, the Church develops independently. The Aksumite Empire collapses around 940 AD, giving way to the Zagwe dynasty, but Christianity endures in rock-hewn churches like those at Lalibela, carved in the 12th century under King Lalibela himself. These sites feature frescoes depicting Enoch's visions, angels tumbling from heaven, bound in chains, with Ge'ez inscriptions quoting 1st Enoch. Homilies from this era, such as the Sermon on the Creation, attributed to Pseudo-Ephraim, though adapted locally, blend the Watcher myth with Isaiah's taunt, portraying the fall as a disruption of heavenly liturgy. Ethiopian monks, living ascetically in remote monasteries like Debre Damo, founded in the 6th century, accessible only by rope, saw these stories as warnings against monastic pride, economic simplicity amid gold trade routes from the interior. Politically, rulers used them to legitimize power. For instance, the Solomonic dynasty from 1270 AD claimed descent from Menelik I, son of Solomon and Sheba, and incorporated Enoch into the Kebra Nagast, the Glory of Kings, compiled around 1320 AD. This epic mentions angelic rebellions, but focuses on the Ark of the Covenant's transfer to Ethiopia, symbolizing divine favor over fallen foes. Let's delve into the cultural exchanges that fueled the myth's evolution. The Crusades, 1095–1291 AD, brought Eastern texts to Europe via Byzantine contacts. 1 Enoch fragments appear in Greek manuscripts, influencing Western scholastics. Thomas Aquinas, 1225–1274 AD, the Dominican friar in his Summa Theologica, systematizes angelic theology. Angels as pure intellects, Satan falling instantaneously through pride, rejecting God's plan for incarnation. He cites Pseudo-Dionysius, 5th, 6th century, whose celestial hierarchy ranks angels in 9 choirs, with Lucifer perhaps a seraphim. This hierarchy inspired art, like the mosaics in St. Mark's Basilica in Venice, 11th century, showing ordered heavens disrupted by rebellion. Economically, the myth supported the Church's indulgences system. Fear of demons drove donations, funding cathedrals like Chartres, 1194–1220 AD, with stained glass depicting Judgment Day scenes echoing Enoch's bound watchers. Technologically, the invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in 1440 AD accelerates the spread. The first printed Bible in 1455 includes the Vulgate's Lucifer, and soon woodcuts illustrate falls. Albrecht Dürer's engravings, late 15th century, show apocalyptic angels. In Ethiopia, manuscript illumination peaks in the Gondarine period, 1632–1769 AD, with schools producing vividly colored pages, giants from one Enoch feasting, angels weeping. These were traded along with ivory and slaves, impacting regional economies. Now consider the Reformation's shake-up in the 16th century. Martin Luther, 1483–1546 AD, nailing his 95 Theses in 1517, rejects Apocrypha like 1 Enoch, focusing on sola scriptura, scripture alone. Yet in his Table Talk, he speaks of the devil as a fallen angel, influenced by folk traditions. John Calvin, 1509–1564 AD, in Institutes of the Christian Religion, 1536, sees Satan as God's instrument, fallen through malice. This Protestant pruning strips extra-biblical details, but the myth persists in hymns and sermons. Counter-Reformation Catholics, at the Council of Trent, 1545–1563, affirm the Vulgate, reinforcing Lucifer. In Ethiopia, the Jesuit missions, 1557–1632 AD, under Portuguese influence, try to align Tewahedo with Rome, but Emperor Susenyos's conversion in 1622 sparks rebellion. Peasants cling to Enochic traditions, seeing Jesuits as demonic intruders. The expulsion in 1632 preserves the broader canon. Global impact. The age of exploration spreads the myth. Spanish conquistadors in the Americas, 1492 onward, demonize Aztec gods as fallen angels, justifying conquest. In Africa, Ethiopian Christianity influences Congo's Congo Kingdom, converted in 1491, where local spirits blend with Watcher lore. Legacy in literature. Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, 1308–1321, places Lucifer in hell's icy core, a three-faced monster chewing traitors, drawing from Virgil's Aeneid, but Christianized. His fall creates hell's pit. Petrarch, 1304–1374, uses Lucifer metaphorically for human ambition. Fast forward to the Renaissance. Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, 1508–1512, shows the serpent as tempter, implying pre-fall. But in Ethiopia, contemporaneous art in churches like Bet Mariam depicts Enoch ascending, countering falls with hope. Enlightenment thinkers demythologize. Voltaire, 1694–1778, in Philosophical Dictionary, 1764, mocks Lucifer as superstition, preferring reason. Yet Romanticism revives him. Lord Byron's Cain, 1821, portrays Lucifer as knowledge-bringer, echoing Azazel, Victorian era. John Milton's Paradise Lost, 1667, republished widely, makes Lucifer heroic. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Illustrations by William Blake, 1757–1827, show dramatic plunges. In music, Berlioz's The Damnation of Faust, 1846, features demonic choruses. 20th century, Freud, 1856–1939, sees Satan as superego rebellion. C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, 1942, humanizes demons. In film, The Exorcist, 1973, draws on possession linked to fallen angels. Ethiopian modern legacy. During Haile Selassie's reign, 1930–1974, Rastafarianism emerges in Jamaica, viewing him as divine, but incorporating Enoch. Bob Marley's lyrics reference Babylonian falls. Controversies. Feminist scholars like Mary Daly, 1928-2010, critique patriarchal demonization of female allure in Watcher myths. Queer theorists see Lucifer's rebellion as anti-authoritarian. Lesser-known facts. The Lucifer matchstick, 1826 invention. Ironically named after the light-bearer, sparking puns about hellfire. Biographies. Origen's life. Castrated himself for purity. Died from torture in 254 AD. Mirrors ascetic warnings against angelic sins. Sub-stories. In 1 Enoch 69, Gadriel teaches sword-making, linking to Cain's lineage. Comparisons. Egyptian myth of Set murdering Osiris. Fratricidal fall from grace. Causes. Monotheism's need for evil's origin without dualism. Effects. Inspired anti-Semitic tropes like Jews as devil's kin in medieval blood libels. Tangent. Mormonism, 1830, incorporates Enoch in the Pearl of Great Price, with cities ascending contra falls. Another, in Islam, Iblis's fall in Surah 7:11-18 parallels but refuses prostration to Adam. Historiography, Rudolf Bultmann, 1884-1976, demythologizes New Testament, seeing Satan as existential angst. Modern interpretations. In Evangelicalism, Tim LaHaye's Left Behind, 1995, uses Revelation's dragon as pre-tribulation foe. As we near the end of our exploration, reflect on what this means for us today. In a world of misinformation, like viral social media claims about ancient aliens echoing Watcher teachings, returning to sources matters.